Okay, thank you so much for giving us your time, Dr. Olisa Agbakoba, the former president of the Nigerian Bar Association. Lately, you've been in the news. A lot of people have made reference to a theorem that you proposed, which you called disruptive development theory. First of all, I want you to establish what that theory is all about before we now begin to apply it to various areas that we need to.
Okay, so since the 60s, we've probably had about 6 or 7 development plans, and they all crawl at snail's pace. Nothing is disruptive. It's also slow. We've had needs. Remember needs? At least the one I remember when I was big enough. But go back to the time of Balewa, his 5-year plan, 7-year plan, needs, Yaradua's 7 agenda. I don't know. I'm so confused. I don't know which is which. But when these guys leave, when these presidents leave, you wonder what's been achieved, what's concrete about what they've said. So I then felt, taking a cue from Trump actually, even though Trump has got his own challenges, but I like to call it a development plan with a Trumpian speed.
Okay, development plan
with a Trumpian speed.
Okay.
Whether we like it or not, Trump has speed. He engages the media very well. He's always, even when he's on Air Force One, he comes out to meet. He knows he's a master communicator. That I think is important. Our leaders are hidden. We don't see them. I mean, to be honest, the president is not seen too often. Governors are seen at the wrong places. So there's a void. So I just thought that Nigeria's going through this sort of challenge. There has to be a clear plan, which is articulated. That means disrupting. We've got to disrupt. We've got to say, you know, we've got to do it in a different way. You deconstruct, and you can say, we can pass legislation, which is important in one day. Kestama did it when the last UK steel company was threatening to leave. The Chinese wanted to leave. We called Parliament, emergency meeting. Saturday, they passed a law. Can that happen in Nigeria? That's what I mean by disruptive.
Okay, if I understand it clearly, this government deserves some level of credit.
Yes, sure.
Particularly with the removal of petrol subsidy.
Two things.
Okay, you understand. Okay, go ahead, please.
One, it deserves credit, even though people are not feeling it. I'm happy you raised that point. So you see, a development plan is felt and measured by the people, not statisticians in Abuja. So President Tinubu's plan, when it was launched at his inaugural, taking away subsidy, didn't get good attention. People didn't like it. But the truth is that it has stabilized fuel. The other disruption is the devaluation of the Naira. Again, people didn't like it, but it has stabilized the Naira. So in medical terms, I, as the chief medical officer, I have moved Nigeria out of the intensive care ward to the critical ward. So Nigeria is critical but stable. So a guy who has a BP of 160 over 120 and it goes down to 140 over 100 is still not well, but there is progress. So that's the measure. Not until the guys on the streets say things are good would I accept that there is real progress. But we must give credit to Tinubu for that structural adjustment. But what he needs to also then do is this disruptive agenda. 25 years to fix the Constitution, it's too long now. It's too long. Every what do you call it? Every National Assembly creates its own constitutional reform agenda. 25 years is too long. When I spoke at Babio's birthday and President Tinubu was there, I said, we can do this in 1 week. Because everybody knows what it is. Well, there's a problem. We know that the federation is too centralized. We know that if we devolve power to the states, it will be better. We know that the states are potentially bankrupt. The challenging question is whether the states will agree to federate into a geopolitical region. because the governors will lose. But everybody knows that the states are weak and that they go to Abuja to collect handouts.
Okay, part of the things you said that is, getting people to think and talk is that Nigeria can run a 500 trillion naira economy, in no distant time. But realizing that our economy grew from 4.4 trillion, using the budget, as a metric here, in 2015, it grew to 8.83 trillion in 2019, and then 21.83 trillion in 2023. We are currently at about 54 trillion naira, the size of the economy. How realistic is that dream and ambition to get to 500 trillion, in no distant time?
Hard work, consistency, diligence, passion. I mean, I'm happy you reeled these figures out. Part of what you reeled out, I first said it. When I said that Nigeria would have a budget of 9 trillion, people said, I was talking rubbish. I said, it will come to 20-something. It came. Then I said 100 trillion. Zach, the chair of FIRS, said, we can do it. So now it's 50-something. I don't see why it cannot reach 100 trillion easily. And why I say it's possible is when I look around at the natural resources this country has, it's mostly lying idle. I remember discussing, no, I didn't discuss, I wrote a letter to the then Minister of Finance, pointing out that there's an entity called MOFI, Ministry of Finance Incorporated, and there's also another one called Ministry of Petroleum Incorporated. These two bodies hold all of Nigeria's assets. And I was shocked to see that Nigerian Railways, in spite of all its assets around Nigeria, was valued at 20 million naira. The valuation was done in 1974. So he told me, well, people ask, so are you an economist? I say, no, I'm a legal policy analyst. But legal policy drives the economy. If you don't have legal policy, no matter what you put into the economy, it won't work. So I don't know whether my letter helped to push life into MOFI, but now it's an incorporated entity, no longer in the Ministry of Finance. Now, can we identify 10, 20, 30 wasting assets and sweat them? I can give you one. Do you know that there are about 15,000 abandoned federal government projects worth about 300 trillion, abandoned since the 60s? Ajakuta is one. Iwobi is another one. Why don't you just sell them? I mean, what is government doing all day? Every day they are working and calculating. Just call people. All the airports in the UK are owned by private people. So again, this disruptive thing means the government has to say, take a policy, we are no longer in business. But
when a lot of people look at how the power sector was treated, taking it out of the distribution aspect of it, taking it out of the control of the government to private entities, and how it has turned out so far, a lot of people may not agree with that being a remedy because, I mean, everybody has a thing or two to say about how poorly power distribution had been in Nigeria. Do you think that if government goes ahead to extend that approach to other areas, anything different will happen?
How transparent was it? So my point is in disruptive development economics, all the chains must be transparent. Was the disco sale, was it transparent? It wasn't. If we had given it to people who had the skills and the knowledge, oh, this guy, he understands the business, then you would have seen results. But the thing was sold to politically. That's why it failed. It was given, if it was given to the right people, they would do the right thing. Nigeria should not have a problem. After all, the late Abba Kyari isn't known for being strong on the power sector. But he led the Nigerian team to Germany. And I don't know what has come of that discussion with Siemens. So all of the monies that went there, where is it? The NIPP project launched by OBJ, the National Integrated Power Project for the Niger Delta, where is it? So that, what I'm saying is that there are a couple of key indicators that legal policy analysts identify, which, if put together, can push the country. Number one, constitution. This pyramid has to go. You've got to have centers of power in the regions. You've got to take a decision that the states are not viable. Let's stop this pretense. You've got to say, look, they're not viable. And that discussion must be led by the president. He will call all the governors and say, you're not viable. All you do is come to Abuja and collect money. That can't continue.
I would like you to look at this very critically now.
Yeah.
That the states are not viable, and knowing the system we have, it still has to be addressed through the constitution.
Yes.
And knowing the approach of our politicians who are in positions of making the law, is it a realistic dream to think that we will come to a point where the lawmakers will sit down in one room and say, states are not viable, let's scrap it?
Don't we have a president?
We have a president.
Executive power resides in the president by virtue of Section 5. One of my greatest idols of all time, Professor Nwabeze, and I said it to President Tinubu, you are the chief executive officer of Nigeria, and by virtue of Section 5, your powers are enormous. Can you exercise it? Nwabeze came up with a fantastic theory. The 1963 Constitution was changed in one day, because the Constitution, people don't know, is actually a schedule. There are only 2 sections in the Nigerian, either 2 or 3. So what Nwabeze said is, do what happened, do what you did in 1963. You just detached the Independence Constitution and you put the Republican Constitution. Right now, the National Assembly is not very well known to have 3 functions. It is the House of Assembly of the FCT, it is the House of Assembly of the federal government, it is the House of Assembly of the government of Nigeria. And under Section 4 of the Constitution, it has special powers. So Nwabeze's theory is that they can use those special powers, ignore the states, and pass a new constitution. Whether that will work or not, everything about disruption requires trial. I don't pretend it to be easy, but try it. Do you know that Tinubu did something that I found very, very instructive? He decapitated the states on control of funds to the local governments. I went to court 15 years ago on the point. I won, but the judge said he would not give me the declaration because to do so would mean that what I intended to achieve would bring suffering to the people. But Tinubu went there. Why did the governors not challenge him? He went and put his... Look, a strong resolve is always important. He might have failed, but he succeeded. So he's cracked that, and the local governments are now financially autonomous. But it must continue. You must see whether it is possible to create 8 geopolitical constitutionally recognized regions in Nigeria, all of them independently acting. And those things that the federal government cannot do well, for instance, if I ask you, how many prisoners does the federal government have? Should I answer myself?
You are the lawyer.
1, Nnamdi Kanu. Yet the federal government spends between 8 and 10 billion every year to maintain prisons, whereas it's a matter of the state. If, for instance, Governor Sanwo-Olu had financial pressure to maintain, he has the largest number of prisoners in Nigeria. He will tell his attorney, why am I paying all this? He said, oh, God, because the prisoners are staying too long. Okay, why are they staying too long? You see, rule of law, speed of justice. Some people stay in prison 15 years because there's a disconnect. The federal government spends money on what it's not supposed to spend for the state, and the state doesn't feel responsible. So these are the little things that if you begin to work on, you will see results. 15 trillion here, 20 trillion. Look at the Secretariat. I was the lawyer to try to sell it in 2010 for, I don't know, I think at that time it was 200 billion. It's been lying waste. It's been lying waste for 40 years. Fling it for, say, 400 billion. It will give about 10 to 15 first-class hospitals. So when I say 500 trillion, it looks like it's too unachievable. What is not? Those are targets. And you need somebody with energy to push it.
Okay, I would have loved us to look at what made you to come to that conclusion, perhaps for the interest of the viewer, to understand why you say the states are not working. Because that's an argument that many people, particularly those who are benefiting from the existing structure, will push. How can you say that the states are not working? They are bringing governance closer to the people. And in place of 36 states, you're proposing 8 regional governments. So what exactly are the indicators that made you to come to that conclusion very quickly, that the states aren't functioning now?
Because they go to Abuja for money. That's how they get their money. Do they have any resource? Let me start with my own state, Anambra. It's got no money. It has to depend on the federal government for handouts. Is that how you expect a state to run? It's not viable.
So wouldn't resource control be a remedy to that, instead of, saying that the states aren't working?
Look, if you don't own something, you won't feel responsible. Do you know that as we shift to green economy, the North Central is the fourth largest region in the world that has what is called critical minerals? Nobody is talking about it because it doesn't concern them. North Central, how many? 6 states there?
6 states.
They just go to Abuja and collect money. When they come back, what about the governor who, because he wanted to become a pilot, built an airport? Built an airport in his place. Look, you and I know, you are just wanting to pull my legs. You and I know that these states are not viable. And President Tinubu ought to look for a formula to make them viable. Because when you apply the principle of subsidiarity, that is, it grows from under, then a country is strong. A country is not strong when the presidency in Abuja is strong, but the bottom is weak. So that's why I say we need this disruptive system, which will make the regions strong and capable of achieving their own potential economic resource.
Okay. Well, at the beginning, before we continue with the line of conversation, at the beginning you referred to President Trump's approach to
Trumpian speed.
Yeah, his speed. Part of the things he also came up with is the new tariff regime that is affecting many countries in the world, including Nigeria. People have different views about this, but what do you think, or how do you think Nigeria as a country should be responding to that development in the U.S.?
I think 2 or 3 years ago, when President Tinubu went to the UN, I was so elated when CNN said, when each of the presidents go on the podium. So when he was speaking, the thing flashed, the caption, President Tinubu speaking for the entire African continent. That's what he should be doing. The African continent is lost in this new conversation. Thanks to Trump, he did what he didn't know would have the consequences it now has. Because when the international world order was settled, we were not there. So now that the international trade order is being dismantled, what is Nigeria's role and what is Africa's role in the new process? I don't see it. The Chinese already have their own process. They call it decoupling strategy. They are decoupling from the Western-controlled economic system. So that's something going on there. There are all kinds of new powerful international groups. In the 10 most industrialized countries, incidentally, we have Brazil and India. 2 countries that are part of the South, not the North, who can come together with Russia, whether you like it or not, South Africa, Nigeria, Turkey, to create their own world order. We ought not to depend on the world order that has been designed by the West in Westphalia, in Germany, in the 1600s. So that is part of what this disruption is all about. Creating something new, so that we're not just a dumping ground for everything. Here is a dumping ground. We don't produce anything.
In other words, you think that the best step is to think deeply and not just react to the tariff by just imposing counter tariff and stuff like that?
We have nothing to, what do we produce? So if we impose tariffs on who? So what we're going to do requires critical thinking of the president, and not just the president. Look at what Mark Carney did. Tariffs. Trump every day sits in the Oval Office shouting tariffs, tariffs. Mark Carney was governor of Canadian Central Bank, was governor of the English Central Bank, the Bank of England. Now he's prime minister. He didn't say anything. He just quietly went around the European countries and said, you know what? We're holding about 2 trillion worth of bonds that belong to the US. We shall start dumping them. Once the dumping started, there was a run on the stock market. What did Trump do? He pretended that he's giving a 90-day pause, but he was scared. But Carney didn't say a word. That's critical thinking. That's what I want to see here.
Okay. Part of the things you spoke about earlier, you called it 6 economic pillars, and one of them being a robust support system for local manufacturing, which seems to agree with what you just said. Yeah. What do we produce? That was a question you asked, though rhetorically, though. Could you speak more on that? How can the manufacturing sector in Nigeria be enabled? It's unfortunate, everybody says it, that we import almost everything down to toothpick. But there seems not to be realistic, measurable, sustainable action towards improving manufacturing. What do you think?
What I think is that there's a policy that should be in place. There must be an industrial policy, there must be a manufacturing policy. Let me just take the case of Dangote, whose hair has turned as white as yours. Here was a man who looked robust and young, thinking he was doing good, put all his energy into his Dangote refinery, the biggest in the world. What did he get? A slap. Rather than the government to welcome him with open arms, NNPC is fighting him. So why would I want to, if you were a Nigerian president and you say, Olisa, come, I want to make you rich. Choose one. Here is a big license to import PMS, or here is a license to build a refinery. I will take the importation because the government is not supporting anything. They're not doing anything to enable the environment. The Chinese Exim Bank gives every exporter, no matter how small, 50% of the cost of production. So if a Chinese 111 is exporting shoes, it gets 50% rebate. So you see, it pushes people. What the policy should be is not my specialty, but I know that there has to be a policy that encourages people to want to invest, because people want to make money. Businessmen are all about making money. So if they suddenly see that the environment is suitable to build factories and industries and hospitals and schools, they will do it. Right now it is hostile. So nothing's happening. And if we don't reverse that, it's called import substitution. If we don't reverse it, Nigeria is going to be like this for a long time.
Okay, in addition to supporting manufacturing, the other 5 appear to summarize almost everything that we've been speaking about: decentralized power, restructure oversized public sector, applying subsidy saving to infrastructure, take full control of oil wells and natural resources. Government must get out of business. Those are, all of them make up the 6. But I would like you to speak to a few of them, which restructure oversized public sector. What exactly do you mean here?
Let's take the federal public service, which I've personally looked at. I haven't looked at most of the states. The federal public service is about 3 million people. And the budget, the recurrent expenditure for each budget that is drawn up and announced, 70 to 80% goes to paying their salaries. It's not sustainable. So the remainder 30% does every other thing. Capital. OPEX consumes everything. But what am I even saying? Oronsoya has done it now. Olisa did the report in 2010. It's unimplemented. He set out the agencies that he felt ought to go. He set out the agencies that he thought should be merged. So I accept what he says, and that we ought to downsize irrelevant. Okay, example. The colonial office, colonial government, were masters of the cabinet office, which we now call the head of service office. It's useless. I don't know what they do. The SGF has about 13 to 14 permanent secretaries. What exactly is the function of the SGF? Because the SGF's function is exactly what the chief of staff does in a presidential system. So we're combining presidential system and parliamentary. So all these three, we don't need it. And I can go sports, Minister of Sports, Minister of Labor. If I were President Tinubu, you know what I would do? Although it may not sound very popular. I will call all the vice chancellors and pro-chancellors and say, you know, I can't pay you people. Every day you guys do strike. I just can't pay. You know what? Run your affairs. I ceased to be visitor. Visitor was something that was introduced in the time of Queen Elizabeth. So Queen Elizabeth is visitor of all federal universities. Is Tinubu able to do that? I said, I don't want to do it again. Go and do what you like. Do what they do abroad. Raise your funds. I will not give you a dime. That saves money. So when you multiply this across the federal public service, you are reducing costs.
Okay, let's talk about Nigeria debt profile. Q3 of 2024, we had about 142 trillion naira as, you know, collectively the debt profile of Nigeria, and that appears scary. You've proposed a process or a means of cutting down borrowing, yes, by raising money internally. How successful has that been? You mentioned it slightly earlier, looking at projects, making reference to the Federal Secretariat at Ajokuta and all of that. How successful has that been in, or you consider it to have been, in addressing that gap or that need to cut down on borrowing and reduce the debt profile of the country?
And because nobody's doing anything, that's been successful. That's my point. So my point is critical thinking needs to be applied. So okay, look at what has happened with the tax reform committee. That shows you when there's conscientious critical thinking, the results. So that committee has been very successful. It has created a new national tax framework, even though I disagree on the political side, but not on the economic side. I disagree on the political side because I don't see why the federal government should be a collecting agency. So let's take VAT. So the federal government collects VAT from all of us. Meanwhile, if I go to a restaurant here in Lagos, the Lagos state government collects sales tax. So that's double tax. So why would the federal government be in VAT in the first place? Allow all the states to collect their VAT. But even if they're going to do so, the energy that President Tinubu put into tax reform showed results. So it shows that if the president can extend his policy across the field, for instance, in Rwanda, they wiped out 10,000 old laws and put in new ones, which is why everybody wants to go there. Today in Nigeria, we have laws going back to 1800s. If Lord Mansfield, who was Lord Chief Justice of the United Kingdom in 1850, were to resurrect from the grave and come here, he will recognize the system. We are that deficient. So modernization is crucial in everything we do. But at the end of the day, you have to put all this together. One man drives this process. President of Nigeria. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Nigeria. He's got to get the numbers right. He's got to get the right people working for him to deliver the results.
Okay, before we get into politics, let's talk a bit about security. Plateau State had been in the news lately, and this same cycle of attacks and violence and killings had been there for decades now. The recent took 51 lives in one night. What do you consider the motivating factor, the greatest motivating factor for this frequent, endless cycle of attacks?
Politics. Politics is the biggest problem. It's the politicians. As you know, we're not anywhere close to 2027. Everywhere now is politics. So I'm a just boy because I was born there. And I know what goes on there. It's not the Fulani nor the Berom that causes the problem. It's the politicians that use them for their own end. And after using them, they dump them. So again, the president. We need to have an architecture around security that is state of the art. Do we? I don't think so.
Your view now may be quite different from what a lot of people are saying, and that's why it's interesting to dig into it a bit more. People say, including government officials from those areas, that Fulani ethnic nationality or people always invade communities that they want to take over. But you're saying that that is not the case, that it's politicians behind this. Can you expose this a bit more so that we get to understand it better?
The politicians need to have votes. They need to have constituencies. So if you take Plateau, Plateau is essentially a non-Fulani state. But as a result of the need to win, they don't have an emir of Wase. Wase is W-A-S-E, Wase. The Plateau isn't a Fulani territory. But over time, they've come in and they've settled deliberately, pushed by politicians. Not just in the north, even in the south, even where I come from, Onitsha, it's a huge community. But that's not the problem, because these guys live their lives quite simply. But the politicians come and manipulate them to the ends that they want to achieve. And that's why you suddenly find flashes. You know, when I represented Jang in Jos, when he lost to Darie, I could see the problem. I could clearly see that this wasn't a problem of ethnicities. The sole aim of a typical Nigerian politician, sorry to say, power. He will kill his mother to get there. That influences the insecurity you see. And it also influences the way in which the government responds. Because those who control power need the votes. And if they need the votes and it will suppress a strong security apparatus, they will do it. So that's my theory about what's happening with security.
Okay. Do you see a similarity between this and insecurity in various parts of the country? Because it's not just, insecurity is not exclusive to Plateau or even to the northern part of the country. Do you see a similarity in the fueling part of it across the country?
Absolutely.
It's politics everywhere.
Absolutely. Lagos politics, Anambra politics, everywhere politics. If you want to be in power, what about rivers? You didn't mention rivers. It's politics. It's politics because certain people want rivers to be delivered in a certain way in 2027. So it's politics. We are looking forward to see what will happen in Bayelsa, and with the announced rallies that are coming forward. Why would there be rallies in Bayelsa, for God's sake, at this time, when the big issue is oil pollution? Because oil pollution will, if curbed, give us money. But the oil companies do what they like. They pollute the place. I've just come from the UK, where I took part in a couple of cases on oil pollution. You can't mess around in the West. But here they pollute everywhere, and then nobody cares because the politicians tell them, "Don't worry, we'll sort it out." So there are all kinds of problems caused by politicians. So we need a very, 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 very passionate and determined leader to take Nigeria up.
The President Tinubu had demonstrated that passion and that determination in some key areas, but there appeared to be some elements and interests around him that may be pushing a different kind of agenda, which come off as being counter to what the government stands for or what the government intends to achieve. But let's look at 2023 election was, the way it went with the presence of Peter Obi in the mix. It brought a spark you know, that became like more like a movement with the obedient, you know, group. Yes. But 2 years or thereabouts after, that spark didn't ignite really. Sure. It has dwindled and gone off now with the current realignment going on and negotiations here and there. What do you see, looking into your own crystal ball, what do you see between now and 2027 in terms of politics in Nigeria?
It's going to be very tough. And you know, the president is an extremely efficient and skilled politician. So I see a situation where the opposition will be in disarray. I don't see them organized right now. So my crystal ball is telling me that unless there is a guy who can organize a political movement, there's going to be a lot of trouble. The present leaders of the opposition are too fragmented to make a dent. And with that, today, I don't know about tomorrow, I don't see anything that would change the present political outlook.
Wow. From the classroom, one will say that the opposition parties are suffering from lack of internal democracy within them. Yeah. But from your perspective, you said that the president is a smart politician, suggesting that, you know, if a party wants to destroy itself, oh, go ahead, be my guest. Yes. Is that what you see going on, or that politicians themselves are too greedy to, you know, to agree or to succumb to one another and accept one another's leadership at this point? Look at PDP, look at Labour Party, and all of them. They are going through the same problem where the leaders themselves, the party themselves can't even agree on who is their leader or what in the party.
That's it. That's absolutely it. There's ambition of certain people that towers above the ambition of the party. So you have certain individuals rising above the party and dictating. So there isn't that freedom to say, this is the kind of guy. Let's talk about America, just to give you a semblance of what I see. The Democratic Party is in disarray because Trump stole their lunch. Trump stole their constituency. The people who normally would vote Democrats now vote Trump, the working class. So in order for the Democrats to return, they need a clean white boy in his early 40s. But some of the older guys in the Democratic Party may say, why? They start fighting. That's the same thing here. Can we get a clean boy? If you look at him, that is the guy that should be our president. Would they let him? Would he not be knocked down by various ethnic and religious factors? Because he might not have resources. He might need to be propped. The country is crying and dying for a break. But the top is brimming with old politicians, crafty people who have been in the system forever. They're not ready to take a back seat and allow some young, bright, energetic, idealistic, passionate person to come through. That's the problem.
I would like to see how such people, such brilliant, people with vision, but maybe very low pockets, will be able to navigate the political terrain in Nigeria within the political parties.
But when George Bush had nothing, they called him and said, look, we want you to be the president. You're the guy that can stop, what's his name now? Clinton. And they called him and said, me? And they packaged him and put him up.
But that's where godfatherism is not being played the way it's played in Nigeria, looking at what's going on in Rivers and other parts of the country.
Well, that's the thing. Here, it is done for selfish interests. There, it might be done for ideological interests. It might be done for interest of the common good. It might be done for the interest of America. But here, it's not done the same way. It's different.
Okay, let's quickly look at what's going on in Rivers. The sole administrator has been there. He's carried out a few functions, some of them getting reactions, all around. Would you speak on that? First of all, the establishment of state of emergency in Rivers, how do you see it? Number one. Number two, how has the sole administrator carried that task? Is it, going along the line of constitutionality and likely going to restore order and peace soon?
What I don't like getting involved in political questions because, you never know who's right or wrong. But what I'll simply say is all the mess going on in Rivers, how does it benefit the common poor guy? That's the question. How does it? Wike is fighting on this side, the other guy is fighting on this side. But they forget that the interest of the common man on the streets is the thing that is taking a big bash. They don't care. That's the problem. So until we begin to find people who are prepared to rise above, but can we find them? And that's Nigeria in this merry-go-round. If you go back to the 60s, up till now, it's been in that merry-go-round. It's not moving forward because we simply don't have charismatic, passionate, driven leaders. We don't.
There was an attempt lately to recall a senator, which some people from beginning felt it wasn't going to work because of the constitutional provision on the procedure, of carrying out such action. First, do you consider that process practicable, that at any point in time, the people will have the ability of recalling their representative that they believe is no longer fit for purpose? And if you think there is a difficulty inherent in that process, what do you think will be the remedy?
Are you talking about Natasha?
I don't want to personalize it to Natasha, but actually that's what it is.
It's all part of democracy that if I send you to do a job and you're not doing it well, then I should have the power to call you back. I think it's a brilliant concept, but whether it in fact works as it should work is the problem. Because as you know, politicians start up with APC and they come to PDP, nothing happens. The Supreme Court has said, unless there's a division, nothing happens. So it's some credit to Natasha that she survived with all the forces against her. All credit to her. But the process is good because it puts you on your toes. Even Natasha will know that, I can be recalled though. Even, I think Dino Melaye faced it. And the more that happens, the better, because it will mean that when you are there, you realize that there are people behind that can pull you back. It's a good thing.
But some people feel that the conditions that must be met before it is fully materialized are a bit so difficult. For instance, voter turnout during election had been hovering around 40%, even less than that. But the Constitution requires 50% of registered voters. Registered voters, not even people that picked up their PVC, but registered voters. That's what the Constitution says.
To recall.
To recall. And then you need signatures to be verified and all of that. That's what made some people feel that the crafting of the Constitution itself makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to recall anybody.
But I think the justification is that if you want to recall somebody, it has to be a very good reason. If you make it too easy, everybody will be recalled. So it's good that there has to be a strong reason. And I support the fact that it's like saying I made CJN, but the president can then remove me. There will be CJNs every day. So I think that may have been the original thinking of the framers of the Constitution. Whether that is what is playing out today, because it's one thing to make a Constitution, quite another thing for it to play out in the way intended. So I don't know. But all I know is that to the extent that people understand that when they are there, they're accountable, it's good.
Looking at your constituency,
yes,
your core constituency, which is the judiciary, a lot has happened lately, and the judiciary had been under trial, you know, so to say, for several reasons. Yes. What's your thoughts? It's said to be the last hope of the common man. Is this still the last hope of the common man, or is there a need for the judiciary to rediscover itself?
Absolutely. There's a need for rediscovery, because perception is all about what it is. If people don't believe that they can get justice, and I think most people don't believe that they can get justice from the judiciary, that's a problem. And I spoke about it a lot. And I would still say that the judiciary needs to absolutely democratize. You know, the situation where the CJN is so powerful is dangerous. And I think the last CJN that tried to democratize, and I was on the NJC then, was the late Dahiru Mustafa. It didn't work. But where the CJN is in charge of practically everything, a bad CJN might do the wrong things. But as we speak, most Nigerians don't have confidence. The public confidence in the judiciary is very low. We need to see confidence-building measures. We need to see good decisions coming out of the judiciary. We need to see the judiciary really stand up for people. We need to stand up for people. I mean, go back to the great days. Look at that photo there. Great days of judges. When they are taking, when you say, Esho is on the panel, or put us on the panel, you know it's going to be a great decision. Even where you disagree, but the thinking, the reasoning, you know, these are people who have given their soul. My father was Chief Justice of East Central State. How dare you come to our house? Can't. And it affects me today, because I'm a very withdrawn person. Because I grew up, nobody can come. How dare you? If you are to visit the Commissioner of Police, coming to pay homage to a newly posted CJ, he stops at the gate. He will write a letter in the visitor's book to welcome the new CJ to the jurisdiction, and he goes away. That's it. But today, you see judges at parties, you see them everywhere, you see them receiving awards. It's gone. The judges of old were people that you don't see. They were like spirits. You only see them in court. But when you see them everywhere, even in the supermarket, there's a problem. So they need to think of that image and rebuild it. And I think it's doable. I hope that the current new CJN, I hear she started well, will understand the need to restructure Nigeria's judiciary. But by the way, we need at least 8 Supreme Courts. If my theory of the 8 geopolitical zones work, we can't have 1 Supreme Court. It's not possible. How many in America they have as many Supreme Courts as states? So every
jurisdiction,
every regional entity will have its own Supreme Court. That's important. So it demystifies the Supreme Court as the only place where you can go. So everybody is rushing. I don't know whether it's true that they are carrying money or that. I cannot swear on that. But if you had power demystified and decentralized, Nigeria will grow.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us on this interview. It's been explosive. We'll still come back because quite a lot is going on, and with someone like you still around with us here, we'll still keep tapping into your experience and knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Okay, and that's former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Dr. Olisa Agbakoba, sharing with us on this interview. We hope to do this again. Thank you for watching.